We are going live now. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this conversation on work-related training and personal development training. We have a panel here who will take us through. So I'll just hand over to Ango, who will start the conversation because my screen is flickering.
Okay, thank you, Nelly. Thank you. Yeah, there is actually a gap in this thing because from the time we are small, there are certain skills we have to pick up, like in the our physical bodies, how we can use them, how we can use our mental capacity, how we can even fit in a society, or even just how we look at our feelings, our emotions, or even how we grow spiritually. Yet, if we don't mature properly, we always find ourselves lacking in our job spaces. So somebody does something in a way and we misinterpret it and we start having some kind of rubbings. We start bearing grudges and stuff like that. So if we could promote a kind of personal development in the space of working, in our working spaces where there are already trainings going on, how would it look like? That was the main theme for today. And the first question, I don't know if all of you would like to answer, but the first question is on how we want to differentiate personal development and workplace training. What are these two things? What do they comprise of? Who would like to answer first?
Yeah, I can say a couple of things, or the thoughts that have come up for me as you were talking there, Ango. My first thought is, well, there is a lot of personal development that happens in the sense of you've got Tony Robbins, but then also who has a huge draw, but also things like sort of you go to your library or to the bookstore and you look at all of these books, and I know even I've spent some time in Asia and seen sort of actually they're really quite switched on to or certain elements are quite switched on to self-development, but that is very much a personal thing and very separate from the work environment. And so when I think about the trainings in the work environment, I tend to see you'll get it, but it will be couched, say, in leadership training. And so, sort of what it means to be a leader, a good leader. You might have it in sort of training around resilience. So it's focused on sort of your role at work or the impact of work on you. Or for example, you might have a team away day. And so there's, I think, an element of self-development in that team building exercise that might happen, but it's very much in the work, sort of along the lines of your place at work and the impact of work.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Karen. Yeah, that was like the group one. So let's go now a bit deeper into work-related trainings. We have like 3 different categories. There is something like the induction training that goes on. There is the there is the proper induction, and there is a post, the kind of follow-up. There is an on the job training, and there is off the job training. Can we just elaborate a bit on this kind of work related training and what it really entails, all these 3 different ones? Maybe I'll just ask Akwa directly. So if you could help tell us these differences and really make them a bit clear so we know what we're talking about.
Right, you've asked quite a lot there. Thank you, Karen, for what you've shared. I agree with most of what you said about personal development at work, because it's not put across as personal development. You're doing on-the-job training to facilitate your work, to help you become more competent in the job that you do. It's not about you as an individual. The emphasis is not on the individual growing to become better. The emphasis is usually on you developing skills to do your role better. That's what I see at work as in training. But on the other side, last couple of years, I work with NHS as well. They trained us to be coaches as strength coaches. So the Gallup strength coaches. So I think the personal development side is gradually filtering into the workspaces. But most often than not, training is usually mandatory as what is needed for your job role. So for what I'm going to ask, second question is about the training that we get when we're coming into the organization. Induction. You get to know what the organization is about, what their beliefs are, what the culture in the organization is, just the corporate side of things. And then after the corporate induction, you do your probation, and then you do some mandatory training that is required for your role. For example, myself, I'll do safeguarding, I'll do health and safety, manual handling, things like information governance, because those are required for my role. But there are also training courses that you can pick on as you go along, which, as we said, is always geared at your job as your job role, and not necessarily to develop me as an individual or what my career aspirations are. So it is very important that we start bringing these things into the workplace. And another thing is, you do a PDR every year, an annual appraisal, and you come up, they say, what are your aspirations? You tell them, and it's like a tick box exercise, because you tell them that I would like to do this, I would like to do that, I would like to do the other. But in the end, it's another year goes by, and another year, and you do not get these things that were promised. So it is quite difficult, and we have to be pushful. I do a lot of training, but most of my training is on the side, because I want to grow myself into the different areas that I'm interested in. So I don't think, well, depending on the organization where you work with, where I work is not geared at you as an individual. It's geared at what you can bring to the organization. I don't know if you've answered your question.
Yeah, Akua, thank you very much. So now the third question is on the advantages. Just imagine that you are actually a sage in all areas, personal development. You are mentally sound, you're physically very broke, fine, okay. And socially, you know how to deal with people. You know your position in the society. And then you get on a job. Is it possible that things can go just well, or are there certain advantages? Can we leave out the on-the-job training for some reason if you feel empowered already in your personal development? Can we just come out with some real advantages on the job training? What do we see as advantages? If we think we're already developed, for example, can we leave it out, or must we really do it? Nelly, I will ask you that one.
Okay, that's a tough question. Yeah, I think for me, what I believe is life is full of learning. We learn every day. Even as a sage, there are still things that they want to learn or improve, not necessarily learning, but improve, so that learning is continuous. So if you go into your job when you are already empowered, you feel empowered, and you focus on probably the training that is related to your job, it will have an impact on your personal life as well, because certain things, okay, I'll just go back for myself, like when I was working as a social worker with children's services, I went in there, and it was years after that I realized that, oh, I went in there, people saw something in me, because my colleagues came to me and they were talking about personal things to me. And I was thinking, I'm just newly qualified. Why would you not go to the manager or things like that? At the time, I did not understand, but it was later on that I figured out how the corporate world was, and they care more about the resources, the performance, and not the person. So I realized that for myself, I needed some help personally. But then when I spoke to my manager, I believe I was misinterpreted, because I said I needed some support on certain aspect, which was personal. But then the response was, you want to take that as an advantage not to do your job. And I was like, how can you even think of something like that? Because the focus on the performance. But again, if the individual who is doing that job has ongoing personal issues, it will obviously impact on their work performance, which I think that's something that we need to be going in. So for myself, what I did was, when I realized that I was still doing my work training, but I started my personal development training. Like I think Karen said, went on YouTube, watching Tony Robbins, Lisa Nichols, just so many of them. And even after some months, my manager noticed, because at that time I was feeling a bit more confident and I was talking, and my manager was like, oh, what is it with you? Something has changed in you. And I was like just smiling, because I knew that my personal development training that I was doing outside my work was having a direct impact on my work. So like Aqua said, it's really something for us to start pushing personal development into work training, or into work. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going now to John. Yeah, the thing is, personal development, we want to elaborate on them right now. So we have like these 5 building blocks. Could you help us really just bring them out so we know exactly what we are looking at when we talk about personal development training, aside from the work-related trainings?
I was going to take a step back and so the difference, I think, is that, and it's been covered a little bit by everybody else, it's not personal development, it's development for the company. So the company is getting, the company has an objective, and it's more measurable results, whereas personal development, so that can be quite rigid. So you do a leadership course and it'll teach particular skills, like listening skills. Whereas if you go to Tony Robbins, well, that personal development doesn't have the same structure. There's no measurable outcome. It can be measured, but there's no specific outcome. So it's all much more personally, there's more of a personal emphasis on it. So they're two quite different things. And if you're doing personal development or training or leadership training at work, we're going to get different things out of that one class. So so there's two different types of personal development, I think. One's client-led, one's personally led, and the other one is business-led. So as you were saying before, I need to do these courses to tick the boxes. What I get out of it is sort of a bit irrelevant. It's just that I've ticked the boxes. But it's only by doing those courses, like with Tony Robbins, that they're self-developed, that they're coming from me, that I think you're going to see real changes in the person's personality and the person's behavior, because personal development is that step before behavioral change. So the person is not their behavior, it's what caused the behavior. I think if I could define it that way, the company isn't going to, they're looking for behavioral change. Personal development, Tony Robbins, is what happens to cause the behavior. So change is happening before the behavior. And that's going to be different for everybody. And I'm going to get something different from it's the same course that Karen will get, because it'll change my the emotions that I hook to a behavior. So if the emotions are created before the behavior, it's an emotional change. So that may be how I would define it. personal development changes the emotional level, company personal development changes the behavior.
Mhm.
So you have to fit to this box, so you have to change your behavior. Well, behavior is at the bottom of the Diltz's hierarchy. It's the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. Behavioral change doesn't change anything. Don't think I answered your question, did I? Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, John. So I would like to summarize on the things we've had already. So we've tried to differentiate work-related training from personal development. And I'd like to come in as an empowerment coach and a career development coach. I would like to really segment them now into different parts. When we talk of personal development, let me give names to these changes that take place. There are 5 building blocks. We start from the physical, which is very strong. That is the strongest one. From small, we have to know how to use our bodies to be very comfortable in our skin. So if we know the group, the fine, if we know how to move our bodies, how to dance or just play an instrument, that's physical. It's the most important because it gives the primary confidence. So when we have this physical development, another thing that starts to creep in is how do we use our mental state? This one can be set apart from our perceptions, how we manage our time, how we listen to people, how we interact with people, how we judge, just the mental balance. And then we could actually still divide the mental into 2 other blocks, which are the society. So in our societies, the social development, how do we see ourselves in our society? How do we contribute? Do we have a good relation to our society? Are we willing or laid back? How do we look at our societies? And then there is the emotional part of it, which is like how our feelings move, what causes these feelings. So if we feel angry, we should know where the anger is coming from. Is it from ourselves or is it something really irritating us? Then it molds down to another big block, which is the spiritual. This is an ongoing, a constant ongoing dynamic change. It's a kind of interplay with our inner and outer selves. So we pass from a space of innocence and we move into a space where we start fighting. Our fear starts fighting with our ego, and then it moves up into a space where we find power to overcome these fears. And then when we start overcoming them, we make choices. We start being seekers. We seek for knowledge. We learn constantly. And this is the space that we know how to give back. We know how to give people what we've learned, like Tony Robbins. I've been hearing Tony Robbins the whole time. They give back, and they are kind of the sages of the society. So this is the mode, this is the big block of personal development, the 5 building blocks: the physical, the mental, the social, the emotional, and the spiritual. There are 5 of them. And when we come back to workplace training, we have these 3. We have the induction, we have the on-the-job training, and we have off-the-job training. We've seen a lot of off-the-job trainings. Let's say you're a medical doctor and you decide to go on an IT training because your neighbors admire you very much. They think you are, because you're very intelligent. So they trust you. They know you can help them with their computers. You can help them with their technical stuff. So if you start promoting yourself or off the job, it's still kind of work related. It can be transferable. So you can use it to build your relationships in your community. That's one thing. And then there is the on-the-job training. So you know how to interact with your people. You understand the work ethics, the culture, and stuff like that. So this part, even if we know the ethics and there are rules, if they say every door is supposed to be locked, or if you enter a certain room, you have to close it, or there can be a general rule in the company, nobody speaks about spirituality, nothing. So if we learn these things, we can easily get along. It doesn't mean when we go back home, we can get along fine with the neighbors. So we need to have this balance to be able to be a right banker at work, well-trained, well-developed at work, and still go back home and know how to interact and give back to the society. So all these things have to have a balance. Now, the next question I would like, maybe everybody should have an answer for this one. There are preferred trainings. When employers want to send out workers for trainings, there are some preferred trainings that people, that companies seek to have. Maybe in some companies, they want to send you for conflict. That's the most popular one, conflict management. Please, could you all just go around and tell us the preferred training that you always see featuring or popping up the moment people talk of on-the-job training, generally preferred by companies?
I think for me, as a social worker, before I became a transformational life coach, the training that was mostly available or mostly offered was a risk assessment or safeguarding training. Those were compulsory, and we had to, sometimes you do them, and then there are other elements of the risk assessment. Let's say sexual exploitation, it still falls under risks, but it's a different training on its own. So that one mostly is the preferred training by the employers. I think for this training, it will differ with the teams that are involved, because if, say, like working with teenagers, or if, say, my caseloads are with teenagers and the sexual exploitation training comes up, I will want to go onto that training. But again, it is work related. And in that space of doing that, doing the work training, I might see other things about myself in that training. But then if I want to go further, then I will seek to do a different training for my personal development, because sometimes we grow and a lot of ourselves we don't know, because the society we grew up in, they did not tell us how to know our bodies or ourselves. So this self-awareness is strange to my community, because it's just like, oh, this is how, you know, like you talked about the society, just what the society tells us that we are. So, but when you go to various trainings and you have that urge to go into personal development, then you will easily identify those while you are doing the work-related training. That's what I think from my own experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. Yes, Jem.
I'd like to see my training in the workplace, shadow coaching. I'm a shadow work. I do shadow work, but I think maybe I'm a bit ahead of my time. With the younger generation, the millennial generation, coaching is becoming the requirement, I think, which is older generations are struggling with. Younger generations realize that, you know, after COVID, the jobs aren't secure anymore. You get COVID, you lose your job in the NHS. You work in hospitality, that's gone. So, so I think the younger generation are starting to become more aware of the fact that, when they turn up for a job interview, like, what's the money is the first or second question, but right up there is also, and what training can I do for myself? So they're more interested in personal development that the company's going to pay for. So I think coaching, and it is personal coaching, it's not coaching within the business, it's not technical coaching. So I think that's something that's coming to the fore. That's something that's been evolving and developing quite fast, mostly with the younger generation up to about 30. I think the older generation, we think we don't need it. We do, but we think we don't need it. But the younger generation is starting to demand it now. That's me.
Thank you. Yeah, that's true. That's quite true.
Right, I'm going to jump in here and say that where I work, like Nelly, safeguarding is paramount. You cannot do anything without doing a safeguarding training. That is one of the first trainings that you have to do, because we work with children and families, and a lot of them vulnerable. So you have to do safeguarding training. But when we talk about companies, so the training that will come up for each company is different. Another one that is very, very important at the moment is information governance. With the internet, with companies taking our data every day, they need to know how to manage this information. And here in England, and we are in Germany, here in England, we have what's it called? Information Commissioner's Office. So it's an organization. They look after the whole companies to account if you play with anybody's data. They can fine you up to millions and millions. So it's important that we learn cybersecurity as well. So we have to learn how to put pins on our and passwords on every document that we have. So it's so there are certain things that we need to. First of all, IT skills. Which job today would you go and do without learning the basics of IT? So you have to learn IT skills. Microsoft Word in particular, Microsoft Word is in all organizations. So if you don't know your basic Word, you don't know your PowerPoint presentation, it's going to be difficult for you. So, but the mandatory training for us, safeguarding, is paramount, and it is renewable every 3 years. Information governance is every year that you have to do it. And yeah, so those are the two main things, but obviously safeguarding health and safety, risk management as well. We have to do all those things, yeah. And like John talked about coaching. It's important because we are getting into this coaching thing. I was telling Nelly the other day that the first time I heard about coaching was like almost 10 years ago from people like John Maxwell. But because I wasn't there yet, like my mind wasn't open yet to the importance of it all. I knew that it was good, but then I was thinking that it's too expensive to join. And it was like £300-400. Now it's 3,000, 4,000, and we were paying to do these things, you know? So it is important to as well recognize trends and patterns in organizations to be able to know when to pivot. So John, yes, coaching is coming into the workplace, whether they like it or not.
That's true, Aqua. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every sector has got different priorities as far as training is concerned. For example, working in hospitality, things like food safety are a key ones. I think the same for me, you know, GDPR is really important, and risk assessment was very, very important. But I'm also noticing, and things like first aid, for example. But I'm also noticing that there's a big, certainly when I was working at the FCDO, that there was a huge shift into welfare and well-being. And so, you know, even within our office, we start to, you know, that you'd get more sort of locally led initiatives around, you know, sort of looking at what activities you could do that would relieve stress in the workplace, and kind of a bit more introspective led. I wouldn't necessarily call it training, but it is about, you know, sort of a very personal way of learning how to deal with the stresses of work, you know.
Well, thank you, Karim. Yeah, so we've seen the preferred trainings on the job. Now let's move on onto something else. If personal development training was to be part of work training, what would need to be done? John said something very interesting, the shadowing. Right now, even in the US, there is a lot of shadow work going on. So younger people, the younger generation still need to go and shadow before they are employed and stuff like that. So what could be the new ways of integrating personal development? What could really be done to encourage this personal development on the job, like part of the package?
When I say shadow work is dealing with the things that we don't want to face, that we deny in ourselves, our shadows, not shadowing somebody else at work.
So that
Two
was
very different things.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
I'm a positive intelligence. I'm a positive intelligence coach. Positive intelligence is a personality testing, like DISC. What the other ones? DISC. Myers-Briggs. Those ones. You've heard of Myers-Briggs. You've heard of
Yeah.
DISC. Positive intelligence is phenomenal. It blows the other ones out of the water. The downside of it is that it's so expensive, nobody's heard of it. What that does is it gives a really amazing personality breakdown on an employee. As part of the service, the line manager gets 3, 4 pages, 6 pages of coaching directions for that particular employee. The employee gets their own list of 4 or 5 or 6 pages of what they need to focus on through coaching, what they should be asking their line manager, how they should be conducting themselves. So I think that's one way of coaching. It's not just having one-to-one, sort of 360-degree meetings once every 6 months. It's actually having something formal. Coaching, that sort of personal development needs to be, it's like eating an elephant, just one step at a time, not once every 6 months, just a little bit every day, not much, but on an individual personal basis, that little bit of learning. But there needs to be a really good structure around that. And it's about the person, not the outcome for the company. I mean, ultimately, there should be an outcome for the company, but it's also about that person developing themselves. Because as Branson says, what does he say? I keep forgetting. Treat people to stay. I can't remember the quote.
But that sounds good. Treat people to stay, because if you turn people off, you will not stay.
Yeah, no, it's I can't remember what the quote is now. It's a really good quote. But basically, you've got to train people to leave, treat them to stay. So that they get the training, the personal development, but you treat them as a valued member of the staff, and they will stay because people value the environment, the work environment, more than they value the money, unless it's a ridiculous pay rise. But if they're not in a comfortable work environment, that's going to be the first thing that pushes them out.
Yeah.
Can I just say something to what John said about treating people to stay? When you look, John Maxwell wrote a book, Developing the Leader Within. When you look at the different leadership positions that he talks about, that comes in number 4. Because the first one is a positional leader. You're just there because you have that position. And people follow you not because they want to, it's just because you're in a position of authority. And then you have the second level where it's the influential leader, who people follow you because they buy into the vision. And then the third level, you start training other people, and then you start developing other people. And when you start developing other people and giving them the space to grow in your company, to be themselves, to contribute in the company, then they want to stay because they have a stake in the organization. But if they don't have a stake, they're looking for their paycheck, come at 9 and finish at 5, I'm gone. And then they go and work on their passions after 5. They go work on their second jobs after 5. But if you give them that environment to learn and to thrive, they know that I belong here and I want to contribute here, then they're more likely to stay than leave. You're mute, John.
Yeah.
It's so bad now that there's a term for it. People that turn up at work at 9 o'clock and leave at 3 or leave at 5. There's a terminology for it where people are just there to do the job. They're not engaged. They just do what they're paid to do.
Quiet quitting.
It's becoming a social phenomenon. So they're just there for the paycheck. Sorry, what I was saying before PI, it's positive index, not positive intelligence. You all know what PQ is, but positive
Yeah.
index.
Mhm.
It's not very well known. I think it costs to take it into a company of 20 people costs about $25,000,
Oh my God.
and that's the
Wow.
start price. It goes up. It's worth it, but
Okay.
it only works with big companies.
At the moment.
Mhm. Okay, now we're going on to on the personal level, not like personal, but how we look at it. So how could we on our own improve development skill qualities on the job? How could we advise somebody who would like to change their perspective on doing things? Because doing personal development on the job visible at this time, there's some amount of vulnerability. For example, if we want to practice the habit of having feedback, you do something and maybe you want to ask a few people just to help improve yourself, you would need to be vulnerable to do that kind of a thing. If you seek to shadow somebody, they could look at you as if you are not well qualified, and your employer could even use it against you. So what are some advice you could give to people who would like to improve their self-development on the job?
Are you talking about a stick or a carrot?
Both.
Both. Indeed, both.
So I think I'll start from my personal example, because I think when you get to that stage where you have that urge, you would want to do something in the light of personal development, regardless of where you are, whether you have the support or not. Because like in my case, when I had that urge, I knew that my work could not, and like my manager did not identify what my issues were. She mistook it that I didn't want to work, which I was really upset about that, because I was there, I wanted to work. And then I took up my own initiative that, you know what, after work, I would do something for myself to know myself, that self-awareness. And even like for the job, I was working, not just finishing at 5. I used to put in extra extra time, which I mean, most of my colleagues were like, you don't have to put in extra time. But anyway, so after work, I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and that is where it started me off, because I had the urge. So to change someone's perspective, none of us can change someone's perspective if that person identifies. But what we can do is probably having talks like this, sharing our experiences, providing like the talks from other coaches and other people's experiences. When people hear them, they might start thinking, oh, maybe I can change. Maybe this is something that I can look into. And then like that, bit by bit, because changing someone's perspective is not a quick fix. It takes some time, because they have to go through that the 5 stages of grief before they actually decide to make that change. So I think raising awareness is something that is really, really important. And when I talk, I always refer back to my community, the African community, because we have a lot of misconception about so many things, probably because when we were growing up, our parents, they didn't know much, so they didn't explain anything better. And with this modern age of technology, a lot of things are coming out. And again, the COVID, since COVID, I think COVID has come and exposed a lot of things. Nothing is new. Everything was there, but it's just those things that we were like putting under the carpet, and no one was talking about it, because if you spoke, you'll be looked at like the odd one out. But now with COVID, people are really coming up and talking, and there's a massive shift. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. Yeah, thank you. Somebody want to try?
Yeah, I think Nelly, you touched on the fact that I think the desire for self-development is often, so what I would say is that people would normally need an element of pain. Yeah, that they're in a place where they've tried everything and actually they're not feeling fulfilled in their work. And they've got the skills, they've done the training, and it's still not enough, and they're not actually happy with where they are, or they achieve the promotion and they're still not happy. A lot of things, so it's that sort of be happy when, you know, and when never really arrives. So at that point, I think that's when people are ready to go deeper and really invest in themselves, and do the self-development. And that's the gap between, you know, this shiny thing that they think they want and where they are right now. And they're all continually chasing that.
Wow. Thank you, Karim. Thank you. Yeah.
Right. When I'm going to ask the question she asked about vulnerability and whether we want to put ourselves in that place where we may be looked down on. I would say if you really want something, it doesn't matter what people think or what people say. If there's something that you really want to do, you will not mind asking for help, because asking for help shows your desire. It shows the strength of character that you have, that you don't mind asking, even if it's a younger person or an older one. If you know that there is a gap and you want to bridge that gap, it doesn't matter who you go to, so long as you get the information that you need. So at the beginning, when I started work, I used to find it difficult to, to take criticism or even compliments for that matter. So I had an issue at work. I misplaced a registration form. That was like 10 odd years ago. I misplaced a registration form that had registered a family as part of the children's center. And I don't know whether I gave the completed form to another parent or what happened. I couldn't find it. And so I went to my manager and I said, this is what has happened. So she said, go back to where the session was and see if you can find the parent that you think you registered and speak to them. But I couldn't find the person, and I came back and I was put on performance review for to see if I had capabilities, whether I was qualified to do the job. I'm like, okay, right. So I dug down and I went to this training. It was an outside training. I was doing Mary Kay. So I went to a Mary Kay conference and I listened to this lady speak, and she said, be a person of excellence. In whatever you're doing, be a person of excellence. It doesn't matter whether it is recognized or not. That stuck with me. And when I came back to work, my manager had put me on this, review thing that you have to review your performance so often. And we met once, twice, 3 times. And then she said, something has changed in you. I'm like something has changed. You used to be like very tunnel vision. You came to the work, you did your job, your own job, and that was it. You didn't have any urgency about doing this or doing the other things, but you've just completely changed. I'm like, well, I went to a training. And she said, well, I don't know where you went to for that training, but I'm taking the credit. I said, feel free. To me, it didn't matter because I was doing what I'd learned, something that improved my life, improved my performance at work. And so I didn't care whether who took the credit. I was doing something that I thought was valuable. And since then, it has changed my work ethics. Since I did that thing however long ago. Not saying that I'm excellent at everything that I do, but it still plays in the back of my mind when I'm working.
Wow. Thank you, Aqua. That was very powerful, because I was about to actually piggyback on you and say, yeah, you could actually be laid off for being yourself, and even transparency could actually lead you to some dark places. And the thing is, I still want to summarize and encourage anybody who is having that feeling Karen said, that gap is really there. You've done everything, but it's still not working. So you really have to develop yourself to really master that area. And when you reach that place, it's very good to be transparent. You can even go up to your director and explain the place of your mind and how you need to develop yourself, so your feedbacks and all the vulnerability will not go onto him directly. Your colleagues can see it, with time they will understand, but your manager, your bosses are very important. So it's very good to be very transparent. My next question is how employers can help. Some of us here are definitely managers or executives or VPs, whatever. So how would we encourage personal development on employees? How would the employers actually influence these internal policies that will help people to move around and develop themselves better?
I've been talking on one of my groups this week, talking about mentorship, and I think that's a really good thing that businesses, companies could bring in. So not being managed by a line manager, but actually mentored by somebody else in the company. So that's one way that management could bring a process and mentorship, but that doesn't have to be within the company. Actually, I mean, really, we all should have mentors and be mentors as well.
Indeed, yeah. Very important.
I will jump in here. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just, the thing is, some of these things Nelly and I have talked about. I was talking to her that when I did the strength coaching, I decided that because I run a little business myself, but at the moment I'm an only employee, I'm a one-man band. But I said, if I were to employ anybody who comes to work with me will have to do the Gallup strength assessment, because it tells you who you are, it shows you your strengths. And you don't want to just get people in your organization who are like you. You want people who will compliment you, who will challenge you, and who hold you accountable. Because irrespective of the fact that you may be the boss, doesn't mean that you have the fount of knowledge. So you want people who will help you grow the company. And so if I'm employing anybody, they will have to have these assessments so that I know who is coming in, I know what their strengths are, I know what their potential weaknesses are, I know how we can develop and grow together. So for me, that is key. That is, for me, that is like a foundation.
Very important, Akua. Thank you.
I think for myself, it will be, I'll go from top bottom for the employers to make the work environment psychologically safe, so that if any employer has personal issues, they can feel confident to go and talk to their employers that this is the issue. And for me, I really stress on this because it's a personal experience, because I was vulnerable. I went to my manager and explained my situation, and she flipped it around and she made it to be against me. And I decided, so I was sent to a higher manager and another higher manager, and they kept referring me back to my manager. So I made a decision. I said, you know what? I will not say anything. I decided to cut off anything personal. So when I went to work, it was just work. And then I go home, because, you know, it was like a betrayal. And I was like, no, I'm not going there anymore. And then that was the period I was like on doing the personal development. And my colleagues, even my managers, they could see, they could notice, just like Akua said, that something had changed. So it's for the employers to make their environment a psychological safe one, so employees can feel confident to go and talk to them. Because sometimes you present your vulnerability and then everyone in the office knows about it. So confidentiality is not there.
Indeed. Thank you, Nelly. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's really important. so that it's acknowledging that, you know, it is a safe space for people to be vulnerable. And I think, yeah, there's something that happens. Well, for me, it happened as a line manager. You know, sort of you're managing people, and you're having conversations. So you would have a regular conversation with team members, your team leader, say. And I found that, you know, these are real people. You know, I spend most of my living life with these people.
Yes.
And I rely on them heavily to be successful, you know. And so you end up coming into a situation where you're talking about barriers and challenges. And, you know, I think you're right as far as what are their strengths and their weaknesses. You know, everybody's got amazing strengths, but they've got these glaring weaknesses as well. So you have to find a way to sort of address that, but also understanding that this is part of their growth, and to encourage them to see it as part of their growth, to be able to work on those weaker areas, but also key that into the fact that this is more than their role. What you know, longer term, what's their vision? Who, you know, where do they want their career to grow? And so they start to see, you know, that I'm invested in them, essentially. I can empathize with the fact that, you know, it's difficult for them to, you know, sort of confront co-workers or, you know, do a presentation or whatever it is that they're weak on, but see this as an area that they can grow and support them to grow in it as well. So it actually gets to be quite good fun. You know, I find it quite enjoyable to work with people on that level.
Wow. Yeah, thank you, Karen. So vulnerability is part of the process. We should bear with it for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and just to say, it really helps to be able to say, as a leader, you know, as your manager, actually, I find this difficult, you know, and to be vulnerable as a leader, to be vulnerable as their manager, to say, you know, I have a similar situation, or I can relate to that because of this.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think it's commonplace, Karen, to see that as leaders, they stick on the positions that they have and they detach from that human aspect. And then they see their employers or their employees as if they are the humans and the bosses or the leaders are not human. They are those superficial people, which really, really widens the gap between employers and employees. But it's right, like you said, if we are all humans, we have good days, bad days. If employers or employees and employers share that common ground that this is it, it's not just you, I face difficulties, then it's bringing both together in that emotional space, even if it's not physical, but that emotional space. And that is where it's creating that safety in the work environment. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nelly. Thank you. So rounding up now, let's go back to the main question of the day. It was, why do most people attend work-related training and don't have time for personal development training? You know, when we think of it at first, my first thinking is always they are the incentives. Maybe people want to just do the trainings for the job promotion and the money. But do we still see it the same after this short conversation? Why do people choose? Could you just go one round so we can round up with the main question of the day and see?
Well, I think there is the bottom line, and, you know, sort of where, you know, every organization has a budget, and so they have to be able to justify what they're spending their money on. That's really what I think is dictating. But I think, I do think that there's a change coming, already in process, as far as, you know, sort of making a more human approach and growing that way through self-development. I think I'd like to think that it's changing, but it's money. It's always down to money, isn't it, really?
Mhm.
For me, I still think people do work-based training more because they have to, not necessarily because they want to, because it is required. It is required of them to do this training. But personal development is something that you choose to do on your own, that you know that I have this gap, I have this desire, I have this vision that I want to achieve, and I need to train myself in order to achieve it. So that is when you have a passion for something and then you want to learn about it, then you go for the personal development. But otherwise, if it's on the job, mandatory training, you're doing it because you have to, not necessarily because you want to. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with Karen and Anakwa, because even on the job or the mandatory training, sometimes it's just to be there and then to have that tick against your file that you've done it, because even some people don't actually engage, especially now with the virtual learning. People are there, but they put off their cameras and are not even there, but it's like they are attending the trainings. So it doesn't make sense. Whereas if it's personal development and you say you want to do something and then you don't do it, you are just fooling yourself. You are just fooling yourself. So for me, yes, the bottom line is the money. Because if you don't attend the mandatory training, some places you may be laid off or you have a sanction or things like that. So to avoid that and to be on the good records, you do the mandatory training, even if you don't like doing them, even if you put on your sign in, but then probably you are not even in the room, you don't hear what they say. As long as at the end you have that tick against your name that you've done it, that's fine.
Mhm. Wow.
I think it's a balance between pain and pleasure. So what Nelly was just saying there, it's the pain of, if I don't do this, then I might not get the pay rise or the bonus, or worst case, I might lose my job. So people do think as the pain gets too much, or after COVID and so many people lost their jobs, or the mental health problems that aren't being talked about. I mean, they're starting to be talked about a little bit more now. Some of the football Premiership players are coming out talking about the pressures of the game, but they're general across the board. And I think those pain is growing, that people are, look, I can't put up with this anymore. But unfortunately, people, it's that frog in the pot syndrome where, if a frog's in a pot and you turn the heat on, it'll boil to death. But if you throw a frog in a pot of boiling water, it'll jump out. And most people are sitting in the pot as the temperature gets turned up till the pain gets so much, but it's safer to stay in the warm than not knowing what's happening outside. I think that group of people growing that are actually going towards I need to actually get out of the pot and do something myself, do the personal development myself, because that's going to affect me. Doing it at work is helping the bottom line for the company.
Wow, thank you, John. I'll take the one with the frog in the pot. I like that one. Yeah, thank you very much. We've learned quite a lot. So we've seen, personal development can really not be mandatory, but should be encouraged by all means. So we have a safe working place, working space, and, that was actually it, Nelly. Or if you have something to say to close, or anybody, that was it.
Okay, I just want to say thank you all so much, and especially for our viewers who are just sending in comments. I just want to say thank you to Vivian, Klinsman, Omar. I mean, they've just been putting comments in there, and Achendo. So this is a topic that people really avoid, like from the very beginning we talked about. And like John said, like the mental health, emotional well-being, people are talking about it more now. and thanks to COVID, because it just exposed a lot of things that we have been going through. And this, what we are doing, will help, even if it's just one person, to know that personal development can have an impact on their work performance. So they can influence. Don't just wait and say, oh, I'll wait only for what my employer says I'll do. No, take up that responsibility that you will go to your manager and say, listen, I want training in this. Because if all the employees stay quiet, the managers will not do anything, or the employers will not do anything, because they don't hear the voices of the employees. So it's for the employees to take up that challenge. Walk up to your manager and say, this is it. Because if you don't say what you want, give a proposal, then they will not listen to you, because they are used to, managers or employers are used to hearing a lot of complaints. So if you go to them and you are one of the complaints, they'll not listen to you. They'll just push you to the side. But go with a proposal that this is a complaint, but this is my proposal. I need this training. And you'll be surprised that they will look into it. Even if they don't offer that training to you immediately, at some point, they will help not just you, but other people within that organization. So it's for individuals to be stepping forward and say what they actually want, what they need, because it will have a reflection on their work performance.
Mhm.
So I just want to thank you all so much. And I don't know if anyone has any last comments before we finish.
I just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and share and to learn from you all. It's really been a beautiful conversation. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ango. Thank you, Aqua. Thank you, John. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Nelly. And thank you, our viewers. Thank you, and
Thank
have a
you.
nice weekend. Bye-bye.